These two server-side JavaScript code snippets contain the exact same code. However, on the left side, I save the code file with the .js extension, while on the right, I use the .mjs extension. And as you can see on the screen, I am using Node version 24.14.0, which at the time of recording is the latest long-term support version, or LTS. If you're not aware, in Node.js, even version numbers are long-term support, while odd-numbered versions are for testing new features and improvements and are not intended for production environments. What surprises most JavaScript or TypeScript programmer is that if I were to execute these two scripts in the Node environment, the .js file will print the string hello, while the .mjs file will print the same string in a different sequence. This discrepancy exists because of the file extensions and how the Node.js engine handles the script's entry point based on them. CommonJS is a legacy module system for JavaScript and of course TypeScript, designed for server-side development and adopted as the default module format for Node.js. At the time of recording, it is still the default module system for Node.js if you save your file as .js or .ts if you're using TypeScript. If you've been coding in TypeScript or JavaScript for a while, you might have seen this syntax already. This syntax is part of the CommonJS module system. But JavaScript and TypeScript is moving away from CommonJS towards ES modules, especially for client-side development. ES module is also available to us on the server side so that we can use the import and export syntax. Client-side JavaScript and TypeScript developers are very familiar with this pattern. If you are developing a Node.js server-side app within a project structure that has a package.json file, which is normally the case, what you can do is set the type property to module, just like I did here on line number 5. This forces Node.js to treat all .js or .ts files within the package.json file scope as ES modules. What I meant by the package.json file scope is that sometimes in a JavaScript project, you might have multiple package.json files for multiple directory at different levels. Make sure that you set this type module at the correct one, at the level that you want to have ES module imports exports. Another option is if you were to explicitly give your file the .mjs or .mts for TypeScript extensions, then it will force Node.js to treat these files as ES modules. You might be asking why Node.js doesn't come out of the box with ES module as default, similar to the major front-end frameworks and libraries like React, Angular, or Vue. It's because of backwards compatibility. So, if you are working on a Node.js server-side application and you're experiencing strange behavior in terms of asynchronous programmatic flow, one of the things that you should do is check the file extensions and the type module field in your package.json file. If you're curious as to why the CommonJS code file execute differently than the ES module file, You have to understand the node event loop, keeping in mind that JavaScript is a single-threaded language. Using TypeScript, that's just a development environment thing. TypeScript follows the exact same process as JavaScript. TypeScript, again, I remind you, is only a superset of JavaScript that exists solely in the development environment. I will put a link to this documentation for Node.js if you want to read up on the JavaScript and the Node.js event loop. If you are currently learning about JavaScript or TypeScript server-side development, it is important to understand this process so that you can understand why Node.js can be an effective server-side development technology despite JavaScript being a single-threaded language. Now that you understand the Node.js event loop, I can explain what is happening in this demo.js file. In a CommonJS module, the code is wrapped in a synchronous function and executed immediately. As you can well imagine, the script runs from top to bottom. It then checks for special queues, which are high priority holding areas, so to speak, for callbacks that needs to execute immediately after the current operation finishes, but before the event loop moves to its next official phase. The process.nextTick function in my code is a special queue, and the print callback function within it prints out the H. So that's why the H is printed out first in this code file. After the special queues, the microtask or next, that is why the E and the first L, the L that's in the promise because the promise is a microtask, get printed out next. After that, it checks for timers. The timers are like set timeout or set interval. And then it prints out the second L. Some developers may get confused as to why, despite the name of this function called setImmediate, that the O is printed out last in the string hello. Well, remember I said that this script runs from top to bottom because this code is on the last line. It gets executed last. That's why we can see the string hello clearly in this code file. In CommonJS, this is considered a macro task, not a micro task, but a macro task, which has the secondary priority under microtasks. The order of execution looks like this. On the ES module side, Node.js considers ES module to be inherently asynchronous and will load this entire code file as a microtask. And as such, we are already inside of a microtask execution phase. Therefore, the microtasks that are already queued, like the function to print out the character E and the first character L in this promise, will have a higher priority than the process.nextTick function, which is supposed to fire the function to print out the capital letter H. So this is why it's showing the string out of order down here. We can think of Node.js event queues like lines in a supermarket, which would normally have a first in, first out algorithm, unless there are special circumstances where the engine will prioritize certain tasks. Take, for example, this older lady using a walking cane. We could presume that the clerk is prioritizing this customer due to her physical handicap. This is essentially what is happening inside of the module, ES module file. For additional context, this is the order of execution on the ES module side. Some of you may be wondering, why on earth would anyone write code like this in production when you have different paradigm combined like this? You wouldn't. This is only for educational purposes, to demonstrate the fragility of execution order based not only on file extension, but also on the different runtime as well. Remember that Node.js is not the only game in town. If you want to write JavaScript or TypeScript on the server side, you can also use Deno2 or Bun. I'll make separate videos later on those other runtimes. Additionally, some of you watching this video might be asking me, in the age of AI, where an AI tool can spit out working scripts in seconds, why do I need to learn this stuff? Why do I need to know how Node.js works under the hood? My answer for you is very simple. There is the difference between writing code and owning the entire system and being accountable to your employer and your human code workers. And it goes without saying, your customer or the people who are using the products that you're building. There are times when you can consider AI in the context of coding as a confident hallucinator. Some of the AI tools will confidently lead you down the wrong path if you are not well versed in coding. I have witnessed this time and time again at some of the biggest companies in the United States with some of the biggest budgets in the world who can afford expensive AI tools. To me, an AI coding tool is like a really good programmer who suffers from extreme autism. As software engineers, as professional software engineers, we are the human in the loop. You might have heard that before, and it's completely true. You have to understand risk management and intent versus output. Okay, my dear friends, I hope you've learned something from this video. Please consider giving this video a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to my channel. It is completely free and will help me grow out the channel. If you don't like this video, go ahead and subscribe anyways. Maybe you'll like the next one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.